survey. Таймшіт вже пішов десь. Покажеш, коли ми стартуємо. Уже? Are you serious? You'll cut that out. Окей, вітаю вас на останньому нашому занятті.
Welcome everyone to our last lesson.
Дякую всім, хто прийшов сьогодні.
Thank you everyone that came today.
Надіюся, що це вам подобалося, ви приходили з задоволенням, коли можна було приходити.
I hope you guys liked this class and that you were happy with it.
Перше всього, щоб я не забув, скажу відносно дат, які нам треба знати і запам'ятати їх.
So before I forget, I want to share a few important dates with you.
Перше, це у нас наступна неділя, оця, яка приходить неділя, 3 години дня.
Next Sunday at 3 p.m.
У нас буде молитва за духовне хрещення.
we're going to be praying about the baptism in the Holy Spirit.
В нас в класі біля 14 чоловік, які ніколи не мали цього експірієнсу.
There's 14 people in our class that haven't had this experience.
То я їх особливо прошу прийти.
So we're asking especially those people that they would come.
Але ви можете приходити всі.
But everyone is welcome to come.
І це також буде для всієї церкви.
And it is open to the entire church.
Також понеділок, 29.
Monday the 22nd, or the 29th.
Так само на 7 годин вечора це понеділок буде, як в нас завжди було.
We're going to have, a lesson at 7 p.m. like usual.
Але це не буде офіційний урок, це просто буде така бесіда, лекція про зустрічі, про побачення хлопців з дівчатами до весілля.
This won't be an official lesson, but it will be more of a kind of like a seminar on dating and how girls and guys relationships.
Дещо буду я ділитися і дещо брат Саша, наш старший пастор.
Dima is going to share a few things as well as our pastor, Alex.
І я хотів би, щоб ви приготовили ваші запитання.
And I want you guys to get some questions ready
Наперед.
ahead of time.
Того, що деколи ви тут забуваєтеся, не встигли ще щось. Все, що у вас є про зустрічі, про побачення, про підготовку до весілля, до шлюбні всякі питання, сімейні питання, ви можете всі їх принести. І найкраще, щоб ви їх записали на листку, тоді ви точно їх не забудете.
So any questions that you guys have about dating, about marriage, make sure to write them down and bring them so that you don't forget them and you can ask them during the seminar.
І я прошу тих, навіть кого сьогодні немає, щоб ви теж прийшли на цю зустріч. Це не є зобов'язання, але бажано, щоб ви були.
And those of you that are watching online, we also invite you guys to join us here in the youth hall on the 29th at 7 p.m.
Далі 6 число, це вже буде July.
Then the next important date is July 6th.
Це теж буде понеділок.
It's going to be a Monday,
7 годин вечора.
7 p.m.
Я думаю, що це буде можливо тут, можливо в церкві.
It's going to be either here or at the church, the
Будуть
main
ваші
auditorium.
батьки, будуть браття-пастори.
Your parents are going to be here and the pastors are going to be here.
І буде більш таке спілкування, скажімо, на ваше знання Біблії, може деяких питань з тестів, які ви мали, віршики на пам'ять будуть питатися.
And there will be a few questions about, the Bible, maybe some questions from the exams that you guys had.
Я хочу зробити всі питання, які ми мали на тестах і віршики, щоб вони мали пастори на українській, і буде хтось з хлопців, Антон і Богдан, будуть допомагати перекладати вам на англійський ці запитання.
We're going to translate all the exam questions into Ukrainian and Russian so the pastors could read and understand it. And Anton and I will be there also translating if you guys need help.
І 12 число – це водне хрещення.
And then July 12th is the water baptism.
Мені ще не дали до кінця відповіді.
We don't have a certain answer yet.
Але похоже, що все-таки буде на території церкви і буде басейн.
But it looks like we're going to hold baptism here at church and it's going to be in a pool.
Не дозволяють нам на природі зробити, на озері, як ми завжди робили.
It looks like the city's not allowing us to hold it on the lake like usual.
Також хочу нагадати для тих, хто, можливо, ще не пройшов конфешн з вашим служителем, позвоніть до них. Можливо, вони забулися, там були деякі путаниці з іменами. Позвоніть до них, запитайте. Я всі номера вислав вам в групу, ви їх бачили.
If you guys haven't had your confessions yet, we encourage you to call the pastors. They might have forgotten, they might have gotten busy, there might have been some confusion, but we encourage you to call your pastor or deacon.
Це що відносно дат, які ми маємо слідкувати і не пропустити.
And these are the important dates that we have to follow and not miss.
Далі, як буде сьогоднішній урок іти?
And then this is kind of the program for today's class.
Як ви вже знаєте, це останній урок, остання наша офіційна зустріч.
So this is the last official lesson we're going to have.
По якій ви вчили віршики, чи вчити ще будете, і тести здавати.
In regards to what the questions you've learned and the memory verses.
Богдан, як закінчить свій урок, ми вам роздамо тести, і ви їх будете прямо тут писати і прямо здавати.
Once I finish the lesson, we're going to hand out the exams, and you guys are going to take the exams here.
Тим, кому вже не вийшло прийти, будуть дивитися повторі, то я їм вишлю електронні.
Those of you that are going to be watching online, we'll send an electronic version of the exam.
Я думаю, що ви розумієте, що вам в зв'язку з карантином повезло, і ви таке отримали, як можна сказати, благодать на благодать.
With this quarantine, you can say that you guys were like blessed with this type of grace.
Ми так говоримо, що вам вийшло, не треба було ходити в класи,
We're saying this because you didn't have to attend most of the classes,
але ви все могли бачити і дивитися, ми все для вас робили.
but you could watch online,
І ви могли писати тести вдома.
and you could write the exams at home.
І це все було на вашій совісті.
And this was on your conscience.
Чи ви дивилися, чи заглядували, чи по пам'яті писали, знаєте тільки ви і Бог.
Whether you watched it, whether you read the book, whether you studied, it's between you and God.
Я хочу дуже подякувати тим, хто старався, вчасно здавав, добре робив, дійсно цікавилися, і видно, що були заінтересовані в цих класах. Таких більшість.
I want to thank everyone that has been very interested in this class, studying hard, working through the problems and the test exams, asking questions.
Комусь було складніше давалося.
For some people, it was more difficult.
Так завжди, як в класі буває. Бувають кращі студенти, хтось краще вчиться, а хтось трошки відстає, йому тяжче дається.
Like usual, there were people that excelled in this class, and there were people that kind of struggled.
Тести, які в когось ще залишилися, бажано до кінця цього тижня вже здати всі.
Whoever still has exams and memory verses out there, you have to get it in this week.
Бо я тоді вже буду дивитися, в кого скільки тестів не здано, хто скільки занять пропустив. Ви знаєте, що ви підписувалися, що це все буде впливати на вашу оцінку в кінці кінців.
And Dima's going to be looking at who completed all the exams, how many are missing, and as you know, you guys signed the contract when you signed up for the class.
Також ми вирішили, дехто мені вже писав у Viber'і особисто, але ми вирішили все-таки зробити для класу такий survey, да, можна сказати.
So we put together this survey.
І ми хотіли б знати вашу оцінку по цих питаннях, які тут написані.
We wanted to know your opinion about this class, and we had a few questions written down on there that you can answer.
Це для того, щоб побачити наші якісь недопрацювання, недостатки, може ми щось неправильно робили, але ви не могли сказати, то ви можете тут анонімно, без ваших імен і фамілій написати.
So this is an opportunity to kind of share, the strengths of the class, the weaknesses of the class, what can be improved next year, what did you like, and you don't have to put your name on it.
Було б дуже добре, щоб ви просто відкрито написали, що насправді складно було, якісь, може, теми складні були, ви хотіли б якісь теми почути, яких не було сказано. Ви все можете написати, все, що ви захочете. Ніхто не буде знати. Я почерків ваших не знаю, хто що пише, так що будьте свободні.
Maybe there's topics that you wanted us to share. Maybe there's topics that you had difficulty understanding. Feel free to share those opinions with us.
Ще щось хотів сказати, забувся. Чи є зараз поки що якісь у вас запитання?
Do you guys have any questions? Прошлого року, коли було це questions with the pastors, вони мали, двоє йшли до пастора, їх разом питали. Так буде чи ні?
Я прошлий рік не був, але ті роки, які я був, 2 попередніх ще перед цим, то в нас по одному виходили. Я не знаю, чого було 2. Просто який смисл в 2 виходити. Я просто не знаю, чого було так, бо я прошлий рік не був, не участвував. Ви просто, як це буде? Може, пару слів треба сказати, щоб ви не боялися.
We're going to share how this is going to go.
А пастори будуть десь сидіти або тут спереду, ми поставимо так стульчики, може стіл якийсь поставимо, або так само в церкві буде, вони будуть спереду сидіти батьки, і ви будете в залі сидіти своїми батьками.
The pastors are going to sit up here. We're going to set up a few chairs. Or if we do it in the main zal, then they're going to sit up front.
У них будуть запитання,
They're going to have questions.
і ви просто, хтось із вас підходить допереду і можуть вас запитати запитання просто, будь-яке із тих, що ми проходили. Да, ви виходите, хтось один виходить із вас, будемо або по імену, в мене буде список, напевно, я буду по іменах вас називати, і ви будете виходити.
So Dima's going to have a list of names. You guys are going to be called out to the front, and the pastors are going to ask you questions.
Це не сильно впливає, скажімо, на те, чи вас допустять до водного хрещення, чи не допустять до водного хрещення.
And this, I mean, the way you answer the questions will not mean whether you get baptized or not get
Того, що
baptized.
більшість із вас давали тести, вчили віршики на пам'ять, і якщо ви, наприклад, запереживали, злякалися і вийшли, і забулися віршика сказати, які вас запиталися, нічого страшного.
And, you know, if you get nervous or answer a question wrong, don't worry. That's not going to, you know, prevent you from getting baptized. Because we all know you guys studied hard. You studied the verses. You did the exams.
Дехто вже мені пише, я боюся, я не хочу, мені страшно, багато людей, я забудуся, я не хочу там, знаєте, мало ли що, всяке буває. Але нічого страшного немає в цьому. Це ж ваші батьки, яких ви знаєте, церква, в яку ви завжди ходите, і служителя, тож ніхто вас не розстріляє, нічого не зробить. Немає чого боятися.
A lot of you guys have been writing to Dima saying that you guys are scared, nervous, or whatever the reason is, but we want to just encourage you, don't worry, it'll all be fine. These are your parents, these are your pastors, the church you grew up in. Nothing bad there's no consequences out of this that's going to happen to you.
Окей? Ще які питання є?
Any other questions?
Да. Yes, as I say, they will have Ukrainian questions, and next to them will Bogdan or Anton will translate you the questions. So you will have the English, because they couldn't ask you English. Understand that, right?
Anton and I will be translating them.
Not a big deal, right? Go ahead. I don't know yet. So usually, the idea is actually what I know already. It's going to be Saturday. Did you hear that? So a little bit change. And Sunday we will have a communion. That's because that COVID, quarantine, everything else, and it's hard to do that in the same day. So that's going to be a little bit changed. Okay, did you remind me that thing?
So baptism is going to be Saturday, not Sunday. So the 11th?
That means something, right? Okay. Anything else? Go ahead. I think so. I will ask about it. I don't know yet what day is the best. Sunday we have 3 services now, actually. So I will ask if it's going to be Wednesday, as usually before we have Wednesdays, or some of the Sunday services. We'll see. I will ask about it. I didn't know about it yet. Okay, next. That's it? Okay, go ahead. Something like that. I don't know yet.
We're going to make you jump in. Head first, dive.
Diving? Yeah, I think everything will be good. Don't worry about it. Ми навіть не маємо ще самого басейну. Ще ми його не купили. То я навіть не знаю, як він виглядить. Окей. Ще питання? No. Okay. I think no. That's different thing. Я думаю, що ви будете заходити, мабуть, по двох, як завжди, як на озері ми приймали. Хтось буде, у нас їх є 28, то у вас якраз є попарно. То кожен буде по 2 заходити, я так думаю. Того, що, мабуть, 2 служителя або 3 буде, будемо бачити скільки. Побачив ще, я не знаю точно. Ну, ви знаєте, що ви маєте підготувати собі білі одежі. Знаєте про це, так? Брати білі брюки, білі рубашки, білі носки, дівчата білі плаття. І make sure, що вони не просвітляються після того, як ви в воду. Okay? That's important. Because
So,
lots of confused with that.
reminder for everyone, you guys have to bring your own white clothes. Guys, white pants or jeans and a shirt, socks. Girls, a white dress, and make sure it doesn't, well, both guys and girls, make sure it doesn't go see-through when it gets wet.
Да. Бо це looks funny, якщо хтось наружу дивиться, а ви себе чувствуєте дуже некомфортно. Будьте уверені, бо це буде свято. I'm not comfortable. Okay? Understand that? Okay. Anything else? Окей. Богдан закінчить урок, я вам роздам тести. А це зараз напишіть, поки урок буде йти, то до кінця уроку треба, щоб ви мені їх здали, бо щоб потім я вас вже не шукав, не знаходив. Окей? You ready?
So they're going to be writing, not listening to me?
Oh, I think they're really smart enough to
They could
write down and
multitask.
listen to you. Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So you guys nervous yet?
Oh, you did it? Did it?
It'll be fine. I went through it, so if I went through it, you guys can do it. Nothing to worry about. It's important to know that these pastors, your parents, they're just like me and you. They got 2 arms, 2 legs, they've got 2 eyes, they got a brain. They're just normal people like me and you. So nothing to worry about. It'll be fine. So today's lesson is on the world and the state. So we're going to talk about the world we live in, what it means when we say, don't love the world, or, what the world means. And we're also going to talk about the state, the government, the political system that we live in, and our relationship to it, as well as the churches. So we'll start with the world. If this thing works. So what is the world? When I say the world, when the Bible says the world, what does it mean? There are two definitions that the Bible uses. The typical definitions, and I pulled this straight from Google, is the earth, together with all its countries, people, and natural features, right? The world refers to what we see, the physical, the mountains, the stars, moon, and sun, the trees. It refers to the cities, it refers to the countries, the human civilization that lives in it, us. That's one definition of the world. The other definition of the world that the Bible likes to use, mankind fallen away from God. Mankind fallen away from God. We learned previously, we remember the story about Adam and Eve when they decided to disobey God and rebel against him. They decided to trust someone else. They decided to trust Satan, right? And they fell away from God. And we see the consequence of the world right now. The sin, the sadness, the anger, the violence. We see it right now, and that's the consequence of the fallen world. And oftentimes when the Bible refers to the world, this is the definition it is referring to. It is the source of our temptations, right? The world offers things that are enticing to us, things that we want, things that distract us from God, things that are not necessarily good for us, but we still want them. We also learned that God is separated from the world, and the world is separated from God, because God is holy, but the world is sinful. So in a sense, that is the definition of what is the world. One is the physical, and the other one is mankind and sin. So what does the world offer? I didn't list everything, but on the screen you can see some of the things, like money. Money is a big thing the world offers, right? And these are not necessarily bad things, but they can distract us from what is true and what we need to do here. Many people start businesses, go after get rich quick schemes just so they can get money, so they can get fortune, prosperity. Same with entertainment, experience, luxury. It's all about that experience right now, right? We when we go home, what do? We like to relax. We like to turn on Netflix, some video games, have some entertainment, go to a concert, movie theater. These are all the things the world offers, something to relax in. People work all their lives so they can go on a fancy vacation, enjoy some luxury that usually they can't afford. Another thing is knowledge, wisdom, education, right? I believe everyone's parents these days is pushing their kid, pushing them to go to college, get an education. Because that's what you have to be these days. You have to have a degree behind you to be respected in today's society. And, the smarter you are, the more respect you're going to get. Fame, influence, popularity, also things the world offers. We see these celebrities, we see these rock stars, we see the lives they're living, right? And we try to mimic them. One of the easiest way to do it is through social media. We always try to get those likes, those followers. We try to become little celebrities. These are all the things the world offers. And really, the whole point, the world tries to offer happiness. What they say is, if you get these things, if you reach all your goals, if you get rich, you become famous, you have the influence, you'll be happy. That is the whole point. Everyone in this world is searching for happiness. However, what they don't realize is that happiness, if I could get my slides right, that happiness doesn't last. It dries up, it cracks. And all of a sudden, you feel depression. All of a sudden, you feel anxiety. And we see that a lot in the world today. If we compare our lives to history, to the ancient people, we live really comfortable lives. We don't have to walk anywhere. Before, people had to walk to go to work, to school, or wherever. Today, we have air-conditioned cars. We drive and we oftentimes take it for granted. Things like running water, clean water, many people back then didn't have. Most people didn't have nice houses we have today, right? They didn't have the entertainment we have today. Compared to those people, we are living like kings and queens and emperors and empresses. But, especially in the United States and other places of the world, where there's a lot of prosperity, we have the highest rates of depression, the highest rates of anxiety. Why is that? And that's because the world doesn't offer true happiness. It's kind of like a flower that is cut, right, and put in a vase. It looks beautiful for a little bit, and then it dies, it shrivels up, and you throw it away. So let's go to the other side of the spectrum. What does God offer? God offers salvation. God offers salvation from sin. God offers eternal life. He lets you live forever. What God focuses is on your spiritual. Because as we learned in our previous lessons again, is that our body, we are not just the physical, right? We are made of the body, soul, and spirit. And what God offers is good for the spirit. God restores that relationship that he had with Adam and Eve. He offers true peace and joy. And to be honest, looking down this list, maybe somebody doesn't understand why we would choose this over all the things the world offers. Because, to be honest, it's easier to understand the things we see, right? It's easy to understand fame, money, luxury. It's easy to understand that, and that's what we want, and oftentimes that's what we pursue. And you can't truly experience what God has to offer until you experience it yourself, until the Holy Spirit touches you. And that is why And that is why it is important for us to experience this. So we can share this with other people, share our testimonies with others, share what we experience in our lives, the transformation, the change with the people who are still living in the world. The Bible says many different things about the world. Ecclesiastes puts it in a very direct term. And maybe you've heard of this verse. It says, Ecclesiastes 1:2. It says, meaningless, meaningless, says the teacher. Utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Maybe in another translation, it's more familiar. It says, vanity, vanity. Everything is vanity. Right? It kind of seems harsh, right? Like, what's the point of living if everything is meaningless, if everything is vanity? And this is King Solomon. Most people believe it was King Solomon writing the book of Ecclesiastes. And he had the opportunity to try whatever he wanted. He was the richest man on earth. And there's different things that he tried. And in this book, he writes about his experiences. And his conclusion is, everything is meaningless. He's tried everything we want to do. He's tried everything. And he concluded, it's vanity, it's meaningless. However, there is hope. One thing he concluded that is not meaningless is God. And without God, there's really no purpose of living here on earth. 1 John 2:15, Not Jesus. 1 John 2:15, Apostle John is writing to a church, and he says, do not love the world or anything in the world. And it might seem harsh, well, we're in the world. How can we not love at least some of it? But what he's trying to say is, don't fall in love with the physical things. Don't fall in love with the things that you will lose. Don't fall in love with wealth. Don't fall in love with power. Those things will come and they will go away. But what you should truly be focused on is God's kingdom. What you truly should be focused on is God's will in your life. What can you do for God? How can you spread the gospel? How can you bring God glory? And really, human society created a culture that is exactly opposite of what God intended. Right? There's a saying that I really like, and it says, God creates, but Satan counterfeits. God creates something good, and Satan tries to ruin. Satan tries to create something similar to get our attention, but distract us from God. One thing, for example, marriage. Right? Marriage is a good thing. Marriage is structured like this. First you have Jesus, then you have the husband, then the wife, and then the children. That is the structure that the Bible teaches about the family, about marriage. However, Satan counterfeits. Today's family is no longer obvious. It doesn't have to be a husband and a wife. It doesn't have to be a husband, wife, children. And they take Jesus out of it. He counterfeits. And people suffer. So this leads us to a question. So we just learned, the world is evil, the world is bad, right? We don't want to pursue what's in the world. We should pursue what is God's. But this brings us to the question now, should we separate ourselves from the world? And that is not a popular teaching anymore, but it used to be more popular historically. Many people tried to set themselves apart. Right? We've all heard of the hermit that lives somewhere in the mountains or in the deep woods. He hides from all the people. He doesn't have any social interactions. The only thing, sometimes he goes into the village to buy basic food and water so he can survive. But that's about it. And the thinking is, if I can separate myself from the world, I can separate myself from sin. But that often doesn't work. And a good example of this is in the Catholic Church, the monks and the nuns, they promised their entire life not to marry and not to pursue these worldly things, just so they can lock themselves up in a monastery and study God's word that way. A modern example, maybe you've known, but is the Amish, right? They live in their separate communities. They dress a different way. They don't. They believe all technology and all advancements are evil, and they separate themselves from the world. Those are just a few extreme examples. And it also brings us to the next question. Should we adapt to the world? This is a more popular teaching these days. Many churches and people, they take everything the world has to offer them. Culture, as we know, changes. People change. We dress differently than how people did 1,000 years ago, even 200 years ago. We dress differently. We listen to different types of music. We live differently. We talk differently. Every culture continues to change. But many people take this to the extreme. We have to accept everything that has changed about culture, not just some things, but everything. And the idea is, if I become like them, I can understand and I can share the gospel. Right? This is an excuse people might use when they hang out with their non-Christian friends. The excuse is, well, I have the opportunity to share Jesus with them. But how often does that happen? Most likely never. Dating non-Christians, whether you're a guy or a girl, right? The Bible preaches against dating people and marrying people that are not Christians. But people still do that because they believe that I can change them. But what happens when you put a rotten apple into a batch of good apples? That bad apple doesn't all of a sudden turn good, right? On the contrary, all the good apples start rotting. When you open up a box or a bag of apples, what do when you see a rotten apple? You throw it away so that the other apples don't get contaminated. In the same way, we as Christians shouldn't accept everything in the world and not fully adapt to the culture. So what does Jesus say about the world? It's an interesting thing I want to mention because I want to turn our attention to Jesus' prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. John 17:15. This is a prayer Jesus said right before he died. Right before he was taken to be tortured and crucified. He was thinking of us. John 17:15 says, "My prayer is not that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one." And if you read that chapter, and if you study it, you will see Jesus is not only talking about the disciples that were alive with him, but he was also talking about the descendants, the church, us, basically. And what he was saying is not to take us Christians out of the world, but to protect us from the evil one. In Mark 16:15, he gave us the commission to stay in the world, to actually go into the world and to preach the gospel to all nations. So the teaching, that we should separate ourselves from the world is incorrect. We can't physically leave the world. We were meant to be the light. We were meant to be the salt. We were meant to be the example of what God intended life to be here on earth. And we are to share our experience, our testimonies, share the grace we experience from God with others. So on the screen, you see some things that, our church talks about a lot. Some worldly things. And I kind of want to briefly go over them and just, mention, because I think a lot of this has already been reviewed in this class, but just mention them and review them. Number one is dancing. It is a controversial topic these days, right? Some people believe dancing is okay. Others say, no, you can't. Our church's stance on dancing is that they are against it. And here's the reasoning. when you think of dancing, what do you think of? You think of, a party, a club. You think of loud music, right? And what do people do when they dance? They show off their bodies. It's really sexualized. It's really kind of like animals do a mating dance in the wild. That's kind of like our human instincts kicking in to find that, partner that and to attract them sexually. Drinking also is another thing we reviewed. Our church is against drinking as well. And that is because it opens the door to sin. It opens the door to sinful opportunities. Alcohol, it takes control of your body. If you drink too much, it takes control of you. All of a sudden, you're not in your own mind. It has influence over you. It has influence over your actions. We can also add, drugs and marijuana into that. They have the same effect. Partying. Now, I don't want to preach against partying because we all love good parties, right? We attend good parties even here at church. But the parties I want to preach against is the ones, you see on TV, the ones you see in movies, the college parties, those wild parties, right? Even if you are the most holy person, if you go there, it opens up an opportunity for you to sin. It opens up an opportunity for people to influence your life. And that one day you decide to go could change your life completely. Because peer pressure. We all don't, everybody gets affected by peer pressure, right? And, when there's more people urging you to do something, encouraging you to do something, you're more likely to do it. Music. Music is also a very controversial topic in churches these days. But the music we listen to, it affects our souls. It affects us. Now, I'm not preaching against drums. I'm not preaching against loud or quiet music. I'm not preaching against, Hillsong or anything. But what I do want to mention is the songs you listen to, you should be careful. Like the words they say, the words they sing, the topics they sing about. All these things we listen to, and they're subconsciously in our mind. One of the things with music is the lyrics, the song gets stuck in your head, right? Whether it's a worship song or whether it's Drake, it gets stuck in your head. And those words repeat themselves over and over and over again. And they influence your soul. They influence your thinking. So we got to be careful what we let in. Next one is playing cards. Now this topic I wasn't really certain about. But right before this lesson, I talked to Dima, and I'm sure he'd be willing to share a lot more on it. But our church is against playing cards. For the longest time, I didn't know this, but the reasoning is because they have a demonic background. They were created, this concept was created from the occult, from Satan. It was the things that are drawn on these cards are meant to represent the opposite of God's kingdom. Now, I'm not talking about like cards like Uno, but I'm talking about cards that, are up on the screen, the ace, the king of spades, etc. And a lot of people that have a history of playing these cards, they're affected spiritually. They start having nightmares. Because many people that are comfortable with these cards, that have used these cards, have used them to predict the future, to call out on demons, to call out on spiritual beings. And that is the background of these things. And that is why our church doesn't accept them. Video games, and you could also add movies to this square. Now, I'm not saying, video games and movies are bad. But one thing we have to learn in our life is balance. Right? When you find yourself binge watching that show, when you find yourself sitting hours and hours in front of the screen playing video games, when you feel like you're addicted, that's when it becomes a problem. When that's the only thing you're doing. When it starts affecting your life, when you decide to stay home instead of going to church, when you decide to stay home instead of going to small group, when it starts affecting your life, when you stay home instead of going out with friends even. it becomes a problem in your life. So we must be careful in the things we do. So before we move on to the church and state, do you guys have any questions on the world? Nope. All right. Cool. Then I was very thorough. So let's move on to our next topic, the church and the state. Our church and the government, what kind of relationship they have between each other, and what kind of relationship they should have. So let's compare the two really quick. So the church is an assembly of God's chosen people. It's not a building. It's not simply an organization. It's us. It's God's people getting together. The purpose of the church is to proclaim the gospel, to spread the gospel everywhere else. It focuses on the spiritual aspect of the human life. It focuses on the spiritual wellness of its members. And its goal is to establish the kingdom of God here on earth. The state is kind of the opposite. The state is an organization of people and laws that keep order here on earth. It focuses on the physical. It focuses on equality. It strives to provide equality to all its citizens under the law. It provides protection for us from others, from people harming you, or even outside powers like different countries that are trying to attack. Ideally, it promotes general welfare. Each government ideally wants its citizens to live well. So the church focuses more on the spiritual side, while the state or the government focuses on the physical. So here in the United States, all of you have heard of the separation of church and state, right? The freedom of religion. In the United States, we are free to worship however we want. That's why we're gathering here, and that's why there's nobody from the government monitoring what we say and what we do. But that was not always the case. I want to go into just a short history of the church and its relationship with the state. So usually, historically, the church and state were seen as one body. And this came about when Constantine became emperor of the Roman Empire. And he made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. He saw a dream. He saw a dream when he was in battle to go conquer the throne. And in that dream, he saw the Christian symbol that was very similar to today's cross, a little bit different. And he saw that as a sign, as the God of the Christians is on his side. And when he went and when he fought those battles and he became emperor of the Roman Empire, he decided to make Christianity the official religion. Now, historically, the Roman emperor was counted as a god. But Christianity teaches there's no other God, but Jesus. So the emperor and later on the king became God's representative here on earth. Right? God appointed the king to rule the people around him. And whatever the king said was from God. That was the understanding. So if you believed in something different, if you disagreed with the king, you were disagreeing with God. And so religious minorities were persecuted. Religious minorities were persecuted. But this also gave power to the church because it was part of the government. And we all know the Roman Catholic Church came out of this establishment. And later on, we know of the corruption of the Roman Catholic Church. It was more of a political establishment than a religious establishment. Their leaders, many popes and many of the priests and monks and bishops, they began using their earthly power, their spiritual power, for personal gains, to become wealthy, to acquire more lands. They used religion as an excuse to go to war. against the Crusades, against the Muslims, and against other peoples, and to pursue their personal gains. This ended up bringing about the Reformation, because eventually people began to see through this, that this wasn't Christianity the way God intended it to be. This was corruption. We have people like Martin Luther and John Calvin that came out of this movement that began going against the Roman Catholic Church. And out of the Reformation came Baptist, Lutheran, Methodist, and eventually Pentecostals, and all the different Protestant groups. And I'm not going to go through the history of the whole church. I kind of want to bring it back to the United States. So we'll go to the church in England, because that's where the United States came from. In England, there was the Anglican Church. It's separated from the Roman Catholic Church for various reasons, but it was still the religion of Great Britain, the religion of England at that time. And during the Reformation, there were other religious groups like the Pilgrims and the Puritans that believed different things, that disagreed on the theology of the Anglican Church. And in turn, they were persecuted. So when the New World was discovered, these people saw the opportunity to come to the United States, to come to the New World, to the Americas, and practice their religion as they saw fit. And so when they did come here, the 13 colonies, they established their religion as the state religion. And these colonies oftentimes fought against each other, because there were different understandings, different teachings going on at the same time. And if you disagreed with whoever was in power at the time, you were persecuted. So when the United States gained their independence from Great Britain, there were two politicians that really pushed for the separation of church and state. And those were Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. James Madison, as far as I've researched, was a devout Christian. But he really argued for the separation of church from state power, from the government. And his reasoning is that, the power that has the authority to say, this is the state religion, this is what we're going to worship, has the same power to abolish it. And so he really didn't want the government to dictate how people worship God, how people structured their religion. And so in the end, that's why we do have freedom of religion here in the United States, the separation of church and state. The church doesn't influence what the government does here, and vice versa. The government does not influence, does not dictate what the church preaches. And so, ideally, there should be a proper balance with the church and the state. Jesus in Matthew 22, chapter 22, verse 21, he says, "Therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's." In this chapter, if you guys read it on your own time, you will see Jesus was being trapped by these lawyers and Pharisees and Sadducees. They were trying to entrap him. In this situation, there were Roman guards. There were Roman guards there. There were Roman soldiers present at that area. But there were also the Jewish people. And the question they asked him, is it lawful or is it right to pay taxes to Caesar? Is it lawful to pay taxes to the Roman Empire? Now, the Jewish people hated the Roman Empire. So if Jesus said, yes, we have to do this, he would turn the people against him. On the other hand, if he said no, he would most likely be arrested for going against the Roman government. But Jesus says, give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. In a sense, he is saying, yes, we have to obey the government. We have to give the government what the government requires. But we also have the other half, the church, God. Give God what is God's. And so oftentimes, Maybe you heard your parents tell stories, back in the Soviet Union when the government overreached, when the government, was persecuting Christians, was not allowing them to get an education or get good jobs just because of what they believe. And they were going into the churches, they were shutting down the churches, they were, putting people in prison, exporting them to Siberia. That is an example of the government overreaching. And what happens is the people suffer. The people suffer. Both the Christians and the people that are being persecuted. But on the other hand, the other people that are not being persecuted also can't live to their full potential. And there's the other side of this too. When the church overreaches, when the church becomes so powerful, it starts dictating laws in the government and starts using its spiritual authority for personal gains for other people, people also tend to suffer. People also tend to suffer from the corruption and from unfairness. Oops. So how does this apply to us? How does the church, the government, apply to us? And I kind of want to end with this slide. The picture you see on there is all the city outlines of the Puget Sound. And the reason I put that picture on there is because that's our home right there. No matter where you live, in Federal Way, Kent, Renton, Tacoma, Seattle, wherever you live, this is our home. This is where we grew up. This is our community. And as Christians, I believe we have to be an active part of our communities. We have to obey the laws to a point if they do not contradict with what the Bible preaches. We have to be active in our communities, right? For example, if there's a citywide cleanup or a parks cleanup or feeding or an event the city organizes, I believe we should be there. We should be representing Christians. We should be representing God there in our communities. We have to fight against injustice, right? We see all these protests about police brutality. We have many different opinions about them, but we have to stand up for what we believe. If we see injustice, if we see other groups, minority groups being persecuted, we have to speak up for them. However, we cannot use our spiritual authority if we get into power, if we go into political government, to influence certain groups of people, right? To give tax breaks to your friends or so on. 1 Corinthians 10:31, it says, "So whether you eat or drink or whatsoever you do, do all to the glory of God." And the reason I put that verse is the last thing I want you guys to remember. That is the whole purpose. That verse is the whole purpose of our life. Whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Whether you decide to go into the church and serve in the church, or whether you decide to go into business or go into the government and serve there, we have to remember who we are. We do not find our identity here in the world. We find our identity through Jesus. We are who we are because of Jesus. And that is what we have to remember going in. That is what we have to remember after we get baptized. What we do doesn't matter. Wherever we go, whatever we do, it doesn't matter as long as it is bringing glory to Jesus. And that is the thought I wanted to leave you guys with today. And unless you guys have any questions, that is the end of my lesson. Does anyone have questions, comments?